top of the afternoon. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Hopefully this channel will last longer than the last one. Okay, I appreciate your support. As promised, I wanted to do an in-depth analysis of immorality as it relates to black people. First, we must dig into the anecdotes, okay, of Christopher Columbus when he first came into contact with Africans, okay? Supposedly, he discovered places where people already lived, but he did carry a diary with him describing his journey in all these places he supposedly discovered where people already lived, all right? And his first interaction with black people specifically was that they were kind, they were nice, there weren't any murderers, rapists, killers, thieves, that he was used to in Europe, okay? Now, that's his own diary. This has nothing to do with what I'm telling you. This is, noted, okay? Part of his history. Because, white people, they like to elevate themselves. So Christopher Columbus, he's a hero to them, as if black people weren't the original nomads who had traveled throughout the world, okay? But they want to give that credit to Christopher Columbus, so we're going to hold them to that. Because Christopher Columbus noted that black people were not criminal in nature, okay? Now, the criminality and immorality was introduced and instilled in black people by the Europeans. First, it started with colonization across Africa, because you have to understand, the reason why white people were able to colonize Africa is because they showed up with guns and they showed up with liquor. Because black folks, it wasn't part of our culture to drink liquor, to get drunk, all that dumb, stupid shit that white people were doing in Europe, okay? We're going to start with that. In addition, you have to remember, part of that immorality has to do with human trafficking, okay? Because white people didn't just show up to Africa, just to say, hey, we love your continent. They came with the intention of stealing, which they did. They stole a lot of African resources, land, and everything else, and the intention of human trafficking and kidnapping people to be enslaved in the West. So the immorality starts right there, okay? Understand that part of it. Because now, to take it a step further, right? After having taken our ancestors, from Africa, removing them from their natural habitats, okay, which is Africa, and brought them to the West to be enslaved, to basically help, build wealth and develop lands that white people had no idea how to cultivate, okay? Now, after these black people were illegally kidnapped, and hold on a second, I want y'all to understand this part. Your ancestors were not slaves, okay? They were captured, okay? And among those captured were doctors, lawyers, noblemen, teachers, and so on. But history will tell you something different. They want you to believe that all of our ancestors were slaves. They were not slaves. Remember that, because civilization started in Africa. When white people showed up in Africa, right, they found a group of civilized people, okay? And it was a communal type of living. This is where the whole, it takes a village to raise a kid. All of that came from Africa. White people were not used to that because they hadn't been civilized yet. White people were still taking dumps in the middle of the street. They were still throwing their, feces out the freaking window, urinating anywhere. They created perfume and high boots so they wouldn't step in feces. All of that. I don't want to go all the way back to that, but I just want to start with the immorality that was brought forth by white people to black people globally, okay? Because when you illegally kidnap a group of people, you bring them to America, the Caribbean, or wherever, right? And these are territories that white people had stolen. So this is another part of their immorality, because the captured, okay, the people that were captured were taken to stolen land. So everything about them was immoral. They had stolen America, because the natives were annihilated, genocided by them. You understand what I'm saying? They had stolen land in the Caribbean and resources that didn't belong to them. So this is all part of their immorality. But to take it a step further, okay, they went and stripped black people of their identity. You understand? Meaning, black folks were forced to learn their language. Black folks were forced to practice their religion. So they used the Bible, their version of the Bible, something they had stolen from Ethiopia, okay? Because white people did not write the original Bible. So they stole something, a book that they hadn't yet written, rewrote it to serve themselves, and then use that same book to make our ancestors docile to them, submissive, passive. You understand? So it's a complex situation, but I need y'all to stick with me on this, right? Because when you look at the totality of immorality, no other group of people is more immoral than white people. So when you strip a group of people of their language, culture, identity, religion, last names, okay? What you're doing now is instilling your immoral values or immorality into them because you want them to be like you. You were kidnappers because when you went to Africa, you kidnapped people. When you went to Africa, you colonized people. When you came to America, you went to the Caribbean, you stole land that didn't belong to you. These are all crimes that these people committed and basically instilled and enforced in black folks with guns. Because you have to understand, black people welcome white people with open arms. We never had any ill intention when we first came into contact with white people, because if that was the case, if we were as immoral as white people, we would have killed them the minute we came into contact with them. You understand? Yet, Christopher Columbus noted that, they can easily be conquered. So, the nature of the beast, from the time he discovered, civilization, was that, we can do this and that to these people because they're so nice to us. They're so civilized. They're not killing each other. They're not, raping each other. They're not enslaving one another. All of these things were not present when white people showed up, to colonize Africa and to capture, to human traffic our ancestors to the West. Because one of the main reasons slavery happened, they want to tell you, is capitalism. Yeah, that's one of the reasons, but it mostly has to do with the laziness of white people, okay? Because white people did not, to this day, white people have not worked their own land. They can't even cultivate their land to this day because the Hispanics right now have replaced, what black people had done for them during slavery, which was cultivate their land. Okay, once they started to basically send back, deport, this is a word that they use, right? Deport Hispanic people back to their homeland. Now the farms, the agricultural department of, across America, is being destroyed, right now because white people don't know how to work their own land and they can't find other white people to hire to do that job. So they don't like to pay people to work. Well, they don't like to give people livable wages to work their land for them. You understand? Which is why illegal immigration, is a strength behind the agricultural department of America, period. The farming industry cannot survive without illegal, immigration. because they want to pay Hispanic people slave wages, something that black people are no longer willing to do. Okay? But I deviated from my point. The immorality started when they landed in Africa, and then it developed from there, stripping us of our identity, religion, languages, and everything that we knew that was part of our nature, part of our culture. They took that away and started to instill, everything about them into us. Okay? They raped our women and turned their backs on the children that they left behind. To this day, they're still doing that. It's a lot of UN missions around the world, right? And these UN missions involve military men from many different nations. When they go to Haiti, and other third world countries for their mission, right? They leave behind thousands of babies because they rape women, and they're still not responsible. So the absent father syndrome, or phenomenon started with them. You understand? Because our original complexion, has faded because of white people's raping of our ancestors, our great-great-grandmothers. This is what they've done. This is another form of immorality they brought forth. They can tell you, black people were running around naked. If that was the case, they damn sure weren't going around raping people. You understand? Our ancestors were not raping women if they were running around naked. So the whole immorality thing started with them. And I want y'all to understand they've not deviated from their nature. They haven't evolved. They're not civilized on any level, which is one of the main reasons why you see Trump is acting, as a natural white man. You understand? White people learn compassion from black people because they have never been a compassionate group of people, period. To this day, you can see it. I can reference so many different cases. The latest one, Corn Wiley. You understand? This white man decided to unload his revolver or his gun into a car with a 1-year-old without even as much as check to see if what he was told was verified. That's the immorality of white people. Trump cannot leave Obama alone. Obama hasn't been president for almost 10 years, right? But guess what? The jealousy and envy in white people would not allow black people to develop any type of humanity across the world. Because you have to remember that slavery was one of the most inhumane phenomenons that ever took place in the world. And slavery has everything to do with white immorality. You understand? It didn't start with them. Other people took part as well, but the original enslavers were white, and everybody else followed. Unfortunately, black people have suffered the brunt of their immorality because of slavery, especially black people in America, Brazil, the Caribbean, and they refuse to allow us the space to debunk their false sense of superiority because they've always known there's nothing superior about them. The only thing that they're certain of is that they're very immoral. Okay? Immoral in the sense that modern day, Epstein is still taking place in America, where a bunch of pedophiles are raping children. You know what I'm saying? And that's being used to extort them. We have a president in America who's safeguarding a bunch of pedophiles. And white people see it as normal because they will go to bat for Trump. So that immorality can't be erased. It's innate in them. You understand? When something is part of your nature, it's very hard to remove it. You have to work on that. You understand? It's almost like a disease, that they're all born with. And most of the time, in order to cure a disease, you have to address it. They're not willing. Too many of them are not willing to address it because I don't know if it's because of their Neanderthal DNA that they have. They're not 100% human, and we are. But immorality, the absent father syndrome, has nothing to do with black people. It has everything to do with white people have forced black people to do. Because when slavery was effective, right, they would remove the father from the home, sell him wherever, leave behind a bunch of children because, they're breeding farms. They needed that strong man, right? The strong black men, period, to go around and breed children for them. So there was never a connection. You understand? A paternal connection between father, son, and daughters. But that's rooted in the immorality of white people. And to this day, the way that black people act, perfect example, right? Cyrus Carmack Belton. He was murdered by Rick Child. His father is not connected enough to his son to make sure that Rick Child took his last breath. I'm not inciting violence. I'm telling you the truth. You understand? We have to get back to our roots. We have to become compassionate again because we have lost our compassion because white people have instilled in us their immorality and they've removed part of our nature. You understand? Our nature was to safeguard our children, protect them, nurture our children. We don't do that anymore because we're becoming like them. They want to put their kids in foster homes. That's a white system. That's not a black system. They want to put their parents in nursing homes. That is white immorality, not black, because you have to understand black history was passed down from great grandmothers to grandmothers to grandfathers to their children. So there were generations of people who lived together, meaning the younger generation would look out, or at least take care of the older generation as the older generation had taken care of them from birth into adulthood. We've lost all of that. A lot of black people now don't mind putting their mom, their dad, their grandfather, grandmother in nursing homes. That is not who we are. This is part of the immorality that we inherited, that was instilled in us by white people. You understand? The totality of their immorality, is unsurpassed. And there's no way in a 30-minute video that I can completely expose it to you. Because white people have spread their hatred and racism globally, okay? But the entire time, they needed a victim in order for them to sort of like maintain their delusions of superiority. And the biggest and greatest victims have been black people. But black people weren't the only people, colonized by them. They colonized India, China. You understand? But because we're so welcoming, our nature is very different from everybody else. We want to help everybody. That's just who we are. We'll help anybody that's in need. And we have to start changing that about us. We need to start focusing more on us than everybody else, because everybody else, they've been able to take advantage of our compassion. You understand? And unfortunately, some of us are becoming just as immoral as white people. White people don't need reason to kill. Mass shooters are perfect examples of that. You understand? They'll walk into a school. They don't care. I mean, look at what Netanyahu is doing in Palestine. They kill indiscriminately for no reason. That's immoral. You understand? That is not, we don't kill anybody unless somebody did something to us. You understand? We don't just show up, and start killing people for no reason. White people are constantly looking to murder people for no reason. They'll make up shit. This country is a threat to America. That leader is a threat to America. They'll just make up shit just to go and kill people. That is their immoral nature. And I need y'all to understand that. It's like, it's unexplainable, their behavior. You understand? Nobody can justify Trump's hatred for Obama, or at least his envy. You understand? He can't let go of Obama. And it's any black person, you walking into any neighborhood, if you have a house in a particular neighborhood, you happen to be black and you're jogging, white people feel they have the immoral right to stop you and question you. Black people, we don't do that. That's not who we are. You understand? When I wrote The Most Dangerous Gang in America, the NYPD, I did the research. White cops are more likely to shoot people for no reason. No reason at all. They've done it because the immorality is there. And then, this is white men I'm talking about. White women follow. The research will prove white men, white women, black cops, black police officers are at the bottom when it comes to shooting people unjustly. Still, that immorality was instilled in them by white people. You understand? So it's very complicated to explain, our situation on this planet now, because we've allowed these people to infect us with their disease of hatred. You understand? Even when they were raping our ancestors or our great-great-grandmothers, they still found ways to insert their immorality because they wanted to make those bastard children or half-breed children feel like they were better than a child that was 100% black. You understand? So that immorality of separation is part of their nature. It's part of their trait. You can't change that. They have to want to change that. They have to look in the mirror and say, look what we have done around the world. You understand? Because even what Trump is doing right now, it makes absolutely no sense. Trump should be in prison. But the immorality of white people must be supported by the general populace in order to uphold their faith, their delusions of superiority, of supremacy. Because there's absolutely nothing supreme or superior about white people. White people will have you believe that every invention on this planet was by them. We all know that's a lie. Because they refuse to give credit to other people. That's their immoral nature. You understand? The crab in the barrel mentality, that came from white people. You understand? Because they wanted to pin black people against one another, to better serve them. They're still doing it today. That shit is endless. And their racism, their immorality is like it's in a recycling bin. And they just go and pick it up anytime that they need it. Look at what's going on with the World Cup this year, right? America is an embarrassment. They're forcing the players of Iran to basically fly to Mexico after every game and then come back. They were searching the players from Senegal. They were, stripping them, doing dumb shit. You understand what I'm saying? Restricting visas. This is an international sport, international game. But they can't help their immorality, especially in America. And the reason why Americans are so immoral is because black people have been able to demonstrate to them that no matter what they do, we're not inferior to them. You understand? And they can't accept that. They have tried to break us. We have not, black people are not easily broken. And they have a problem understanding that. Still, they need the black labor, the black talent, the black everything for their own survival. Whether it's sports, entertainment, you name it. They cannot survive without black people because they're leeches. They're parasitic leeches who can't breathe without black folks. But their immorality prevents them from seeing the humanity in black people. And unfortunately, black people have adopted a lot of the ways that they have instilled in us. Yet, we also have our own nature. You know what I'm saying? So it's very complicated. The psychology behind the whole, white sociopathic behavior is not easily explained or understood. They're psychopaths, sociopaths, and anything else, that is detrimental to humanity. They kill people for no reason. They hunt animals, that's not doing shit to them for trophies. It's just that immorality is innate in them. And we'll never understand it. You understand what I'm saying? Not even the best psychologists would admit the immoral nature of white people, because that would put them under a microscope, to expose their weaknesses. And the weakness is the fact that they don't want to see anybody do better than them, because most of them truly believe they are supreme even when they're not. This is why poor white people vote for people, a piece of shit like Trump. They can't relate to Trump. But their nature is what people like Trump, bets on, because he understands the nature of white people. So he can always use their immorality to benefit him. Like I said, black people taught white people compassion. Just like the Moors civilized them, we taught them compassion. And y'all must remember that. Like I said, this could be an endless conversation. So I'm just going to end it for now so you guys have a better understanding, of what we have to go through. And we have to remove ourselves from these people. We have to basically cleanse ourselves, the mind, the body, the soul, everything from what they've instilled in all of us, because we are not like them. They are not like us. We're very different from them. I don't know if we have to run away from them, just fucking leave. But even when when we're not near them, they still find us. That's the problem. You understand? They can't live or breathe without us. They're leeches. Y'all have a good one.